And okay, great, and we're live once again. Great, thank you very much to everybody for joining us. We're here today with two great guests who've also studied at the University of Surrey. They are now working in venture capital and private equity. They work in hedge funds, and they'll just tell us a little bit more about their careers and their experiences in their industry. So, Chrysis, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So thanks, Marco, for organizing this event. I hope we can add value somehow. So my background is I'm currently an associate director with Bridgefort Maritime, which is a carve-out from a huge private equity, currently managing about 200 million of assets and advising about 2.5 billion of portfolios, non-performing and performing. My background includes being an analyst with a fund of funds, and also a placement year with a restructuring company, insolvency, restructuring, and individuals, and also a couple of internships around with shipping companies.
Cool, thank you. And Michael?
So me, I was born and raised in Geneva in Switzerland. Then in 2013, I started studying at the University of Surrey, as you all know. Then in 2016, I went for a couple of months to Los Angeles to kind of look at a bit of the VC ecosystem there. I joined Edmond de Rothschild private equity in 2017, and worked there for approximately a year and a half. And I joined. Then I went to Tel Aviv to do my MBA at Tel Aviv University. That was actually a year and a half ago, a bit more, 2 years ago now. And since a year and a half, I joined Sweetwood Ventures, which is a venture capital fund of fund, basically. We have kind of a diversified strategy. So it's 80% investment in venture capital funds. We do also some direct co-investments and some secondary deals, which I'll go more into details later on. And yeah, I joined there as an analyst, and today I'm an associate at Sweetwood Ventures.
Okay, great. Thank you both.
Thank you for organizing this event, for sure. As we're always keen to help students.
Yeah, and I think a lot of students will be listening to this. So why don't we start off with perhaps something you would recommend and advise and give some advice to students. How should they spend their spare time to find their career path, and what was something perhaps that you did growing up that has really helped you the most? Why don't you start, Chrysis?
Sure. Let me start by saying that everything you do is important, from high school to A-levels to university modules. Everything you do, you learn something, either about yourself or about what you like or about the industry. If I had to choose one of the things that helped me the most in choosing my career, in understanding everything, is the placement year I did with University of Surrey. That provided me the insightful experience to understand the workplace and environment. And more specifically, I had to speak with individuals in distress and companies in distress to help them get out of the financial troubling they had, either by restructuring the business, something like an administration. One example that actually shocked me and also at the same time satisfied me is I was able to help a couple get out of the financial troubles they had. To this day, there's a testimonial in the internet of how gratitude they were. The satisfaction I got from managing to help people get out of this situation is the best. And at the same time, I learned about myself a lot, and I learned about the industry and how it works.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think that's definitely something to think about. That finance isn't just the role of finance isn't just money. There's also a lot of real impact. But yeah, Michael, what would you think?
Yeah, so first of all, you're lucky because you have one crisis or one person, which is Chrysis, who made a placement year, and myself, who I didn't make a placement year, but throughout my whole undergrad, I did some summer internships. So I did a summer internship in a private bank. Then I did an internship in a startup. Then I did another internship in finance, which was structured products. So I kind of seen a bit of the whole finance world, of course, at a very low level, as it was only internship. But what I would advise to all the students, first of all, I think it's very important to use the career center of the university, which is something that people tend to underestimate when you're in uni. And yeah, you only know yourself and know what you like to do when you do some experience. So I would recommend also to do a lot of summer internships. Like during summer, as you know, you have a 4 months break probably in summer. So do 2 months of vacation and 2 months of internship. It's always helpful. Also, it helps to extend your network, because internship, this is what it gets after when you finish undergrad. You get to the workplace, and you need to have you already need to have a network in order to find the right path, basically. So yeah, and you need to understand also that every person you meet is a potential door to new opportunities. So it's very important to always be very precise on your network, always go to events, and it's super important. And one other thing I wanted to say, that I think people tend to kind of underestimate also, is the fact that people in general in life, they're pretty nice. So you have to go and ask questions. You have to go and knock on doors. You have to bring your CVs. Basically, when you're looking for a job, you have to bring your CVs to the right desk. Because if you're in the pile of the middle of 100,000, at the end of the day, it's harder than if your CV is on the right desk. So you need to have, we have an Israeli word here. We call it the chutzpah. It's basically, sorry for the language, but having the gut to go and ask the real questions to the right people. And people tend to be nice, and they will answer you. So it's a good advice. And yeah, read about your interest, get information. And another point is just anticipate the time. Do not get overtaken by the time, because when you say, yeah, I'm going to look at it after, let me check for jobs later, have the opportunity, catch the opportunities when they come.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I think that's a very good advice. And we've got somebody in the comments asking if anyone has any advice on a newbie for networking, and I think you've touched a bit on that. And Chrysis, do you have anything to add in terms of networking and start of career?
Absolutely, I absolutely agree with Michael. You have to take every opportunity you have. Events, every single event that you might be able to attend, do it. There's nothing to lose from it. Networking is the most powerful tool to getting into an industry. As Michael said, if you're trying to go through the pile of CVs that someone sends through, it's always better if you know someone that knows someone, and getting to grow that network to show what your value is. So it's always good to have the network. Absolutely, the network is the most powerful thing, and that could be either achieved by doing internships, showing your value there, or attending events, or from doing socializing with your current classmates that are studying with different modules. So everything you do is powerful in terms of networking.
So for people at the moment who, obviously events are off now for a short while. So for example, for reaching out on LinkedIn, because a lot of people will be thinking now, okay, I'm at home, I don't know what to do. Do you have any advice on there on what's the best way to come across authentically and actually engage in a real conversation?
I would say that LinkedIn has a bit changed lastly. If you look at 5 years ago, when you had a common connection with someone, he could introduce you straight away. Today, you feel like everyone is a connection. So LinkedIn has become a bit hard, I would say. But yeah, I think, when you have friends of families, family friends, friends of friends, do not hesitate. Send them an email, send them WhatsApp, send them questions. People are, as I said, in general, people are nice, and they like to help. So if you don't ask, they won't help. And if you ask, they will. So
you have nothing to lose. Always knock on doors. I agree with Michael. Just to add on that, LinkedIn has changed a bit, but the message, any single message, WhatsApp, LinkedIn, anything could lead to something. You have nothing to lose. Again, So yeah, always people are generally nice and try to be helpful. So yeah, just knock on every single door you may find in front of you.
Perfect. Thanks for that. And if anybody who's watching has any other questions on careers and in industry, or what the guys have done in general, please do put them in the comments. We can see them. We'll try to answer them. And I think now would be a good time to move on to the industry section, so talk a bit more about your work and what you've done. Michael, you said you've been in Israel and you're working with a venture capital firm there. So could you tell us a bit more about the Israeli startup ecosystem? What makes it really so good and so vibrant?
So yeah, first of all, I'll say basically how I got to the Israeli VC ecosystem. So I was working in Geneva, as mentioned previously, at Edmond de Rothschild Private Equity. So, and what happened there is that when I finished my 2 months basically experience in Los Angeles, just looking at how VC, how a venture capital firm works, I had a clear objective. It was to go to the venture capital ecosystem and to work with a venture capital firm. And I really quickly realized, after applying, after discussing, after getting information, and after knocking on doors, that to enter the VC ecosystem, you had to either do 2 years of private equity, 2 years of M&A, of consulting. So I chose, basically, I had the chance, and I fought for it for sure, but I had the chance to join Edmond de Rothschild Private Equity for a bit more than a year and a half. And so basically I had a friend who was in Israel. He was speaking a lot about the Israeli VC ecosystem. He was very well implemented here. So I kind of started discussing with him. And so I started the MBA, which was in September. The MBA basically gave me a big step into the ecosystem, because you were having basically very good relations with all the VCs. The career center were very close. It's a very small ecosystem. Israel is 8 million people, so it's it's a smaller almost than London. So it's a very small ecosystem. So everyone knows each other, and yeah. So I got basically to my MBA, and during my MBA I started a part-time job at the VC firm I currently work. And yeah, so we started working like this I started working like this in the VC industry. And yeah, basically some quick data on the Israeli VC ecosystem that people tend to basically underestimate, and they don't hear about it. But it's basically the country which has the highest number of startups per capita in the world, highest number of R&D expenditure as percentage of GDP in the world, highest number of companies listed on the NASDAQ following US and China, higher venture capital investment per capita in the world, most exit per capita in the world, because it's such a small country. And basically all the VC ecosystem basically relies on, which I would say, the 6 pillars. I'm not going to go deeply into it because it can take a long time, but which I think the main one, which is the most important one, is the army. So it's important to know that at the age of 18, every boy and girl has 2 years for girl, 3 years for boys, mandatory army. Some of them are soldiers, but a lot of them are going to the tech scene of the army. So they go to units which are very known, which are, for example, 8200, which are tech units of the army. So they do cybersecurity for Israel. So they get out of the army and they almost have already an undergrad in very deep technology industries. So it's very important. And then you have also the venture capital funds, the academia, a lot of incubators. The government helps a lot. And yeah, and you have a lot of multinational corporations like Intel, which is it's the higher employer, which is an American company, but is the higher employer of Israeli high tech. So there's a lot of multinationals having R&D centers in Israel. And yeah, and just to give you some views, but you probably don't know, but there are many companies which people think they're American, but actually they're Israeli. And the CEO, after some investment rounds, of course, he has to reach his market, which is in the major cases, it's in the US. So you probably don't know, but you have like Waze, which is an Israeli company. The USB flash drive was invented in Israel. Then you have Mobileye, all the thing for GPSs. You have Viber. I don't know if you Viber, the phone app, and You also have Facetune. I don't know if you guys, any of you use Facetune, but it's like editing video, which is very, very known in the US. So yeah, a lot of companies which people tend to think they are Americans, but they are actually founded in Israel.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you also for linking that into your background and how you eventually got there. And for Chrysis, if you could also tie into your question, I've got a question for you about the shipping industry and how do you see the maritime sector developing in the future? And if you have some interesting thoughts on how you got there and how your career has progressed just by jumping around, I think that would be very interesting to hear.
Sure. Let me start by saying that in the shipping industry, the shipping industry is huge. People generally don't realize how big it is because they don't see it happening. But just to give you an idea, more than 90% of the trade, of global trade, happens through shipping, through sea trade. So there's a high correlation between shipping industry and the economy in general. Before I start going into the economy and how it will be affected and my thoughts on that, I got into shipping as well after my master's degree, CAS. After I did my university of Surrey, I used to do business management, and I also, just to add on Michael, I also did 2 years of army in Cyprus. Just to add on that and that comment that Michael said. But let me just get into the shipping industry and the economy in general. We're going through a major incident at the moment. There's a few things that will impact the economy, I believe at least, which have to do, one, with behavioral change and two, with industrial production. Behavioral change of people will change completely. The workplace will shift towards perhaps remote working, perhaps on remote meetings. Nobody knows what's going to happen. But there's two more things on behavioral change is the climate change and what it is believed to be the end of globalization era at the moment. On the industrial production, if there's a government response on climate change, there's going to be a serious hit in the market. Why? Because there's about 40% of sea trade is on fossil fuels. If governments decide to take an action against climate change, that will affect shipping and economy in general. However, just to give a bit of a more overall, just to be a bit more gloomy and not a bit more optimistic, let's say, analysts still believe in the worst case scenario that there's going to be a growth in demand. They believe close to 1% in the next 30 years average in the worst case scenario. However, they also don't believe that we have the growth, the astonishing growth we had since 2008. We had 28% of growth since 2008. Nobody believes it's going to be that bad, that much, sorry. But it's not going to be as bad as people perhaps may believe. More specifically into shipping, what I said is about the end of globalization era, where countries or regions will try to become more self-sufficient, and that will cause some increase in short sea trades. It's a bigger subject that I could go into and speak in a whole lecture. So that's in general how I see the economy and shipping be affected. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. We had a quick comment from James. He was asking, because you, Michael, you mentioned earlier that, I mean, both of you have done postgraduate study. And so he's asking, how relevant is an MBA or any sort of postgraduate study to achieve a very senior position within one of these firms that you guys are working on? Just a very quick question that we could come back to discuss.
Yeah, to be honest, it depends how you take the postgraduate studies. You know, you have various ways of taking it. Either you do a master's, which will teach you, and basically want to learn and be more specified in a specific industry, and so this I recommend to do a master's degree. I think the MBA, the way I looked at it, is yes, I learned a lot of I learned a lot of things. I developed some new skills for sure, but for me the MBA was much more networking basically year, in which I started. It's very important when you go and see someone and you have something to sell, basically in the terms that you need a job because you're unemployed at the moment. It's very hard basically to actually find a job and to find the job you want. But if you're basically trying to find a job during your MBA, you're in the middle of a postgraduate degree, for example, it's easier because people tend to see you like you're not in a hurry to find a job. So they feel that they can basically take the time to see if you are the right person for them or not. So why I would recommend to do a postgraduate if you want to change industry, for sure. That's important. If you started in an industry, even within finance, if you started in public markets but you want to transfer to private markets because it's more interesting for you, it's interesting to do some postgraduate degrees. And for networking, it's very important. And if you choose it's better to choose the MBA, which is located sometimes in the country you're keen to go after to work, for sure.
I see. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for that. I hope that helped, James. Yeah, and you mentioned private markets and public markets, and one of the things that I wanted to ask you guys was, have we seen a trend where money has been moving away from the public markets and towards private money and private investment funds? And could you just give a quick comment on the causes or why you think that's happening and any effects?
Yeah, so you had a trend in which it's been now since the last crisis, basically in 2008, the subprime crisis. You had not a big shift, but I would say a big popularization of private markets. People tend to invest more and more in private markets, even family office, which now tend to have over 60% of their AUMs on private markets, rather than 15 years ago that wouldn't be the case. So you have a big shift towards private markets. The causes, I think, I'm not going to go into details because there are a lot of causes for sure, but it's basically the returns. I think public markets cannot deliver the returns as private market is delivering. If you can see, for example, venture capital in Israel, the median return of venture capital in Israel is 13% IRR. So basically, it's a lot about performance, and of course also about the late interest environment we're having right now. Corporate bonds paying very, very little money. So yeah, this is some of the causes, but I could also spend more time on this, but I think I should continue.
Thank you. Chrysis, did you have any comment on this? Or
yeah, sure. I absolutely agree again with Michael. We've seen the shift and the change over the last decade, switching to private markets or increasing the funds in private markets, and it solely has to do with the performance. That's very clear. If someone studies the market at the moment, they'll see what the returns are on bonds. They'll see the volatility that the stock market has. And historically, over the last decade, private markets have been doing well. So it's purely performance based. Now, in the future, we might see again a shift, either more to private markets or more to public markets, based on what's happening now, based on the geopolitical change that is expected, based on the climate change that I mentioned before, based on technology and how people may use it going forward. So that the shift that it's expected to happen will definitely affect investors' mindset. So I expect there's going to be a shift one way or another. Nobody knows.
What's important to mention also is that private markets is very different to public markets in the sense that most private markets are illiquid assets. So people tend, it's also an education for a wealth manager to basically switch from public markets to private markets. It's also an education to have, because instead of having your money into buying some shares of a company and selling whenever you want, sometimes, for example, with venture capital funds or PE funds or even real estate funds, you have money basically which you have capital which is basically blocked for 3, 5 or even 10 or 12 years over a period of a fund. So it's important to mention that private markets tend to be illiquid and private in contrast with public markets, which are liquid.
I wanted to follow up on this point of the public markets having very low rates of return. And although it's only recently that the central bank has actually decided to purchase corporate debt and to actually inject money to the system, before the coronavirus hit the world, for the past decade, actually, there's been significant levels of quantitative easing. And I was curious whether you find that this has some sort of impact which disproportionately affects the public market compared to the private market, or if you have any thoughts in general on the central bank policy.
Sure. Let me just go first on that one. Very interesting question. So basically, what we believe about the printing money, and if there's going to be a hyperinflation. Just to answer on that particular part, no, there won't be a hyperinflation, because I think we lost Michael, by the way.
Yeah.
Because the demand has dropped significantly. Now on the stock market, it seems to have less stable. I don't want to use the word stable, but it's mainly because of the optimism that governments will step in. Just to take the example of Trump. Trump even said, "I'll step in to support no matter what. I'll even step in to support the stock market." You see the oil crisis, the physical gold, the crypto rallying. There's so many things happening in the industry at the moment. So everything has to do with printing the money and the industry and the stock market. One thing I want to note is the currency exchanges. Again, that is government supports the economies in a different manner. Some governments support the real economy, and some countries support the financial economy. That will have a big impact on the currency exchange going forward.
And could you elaborate on what you mean by supporting the real economy and not?
Yes, just to take an example of the UK, for example, real economy is supporting the individuals, and by doing that is, for example, UK has supported the companies to furlough the individuals so they don't actually lose their jobs. That is supporting the real economy. That at the end effect is at the individuals, so the spending doesn't get decreased, instead of financial economy, which goes through the banking sector or perhaps the stock market.
Thank you. Unless you had anything else to add, Michael.
I agree with Chrysis. Very well explained.
I thought to ask a closing question before we move to more other questions from the public, or we can go slightly deeper into one of the topics. So the obvious question that everyone gets asked nowadays is, how do you think your industry will cope with the impact of coronavirus? I mean, Chrysis, you've already almost answered that within the shipping industry, but I'm quite curious to see, not only with the impact of coronavirus that has certain societal effects and certain economic effects because it stops certain types of businesses from operating, but I was more curious in terms of the corporate debt crisis that was starting to happen in the United States before the Fed stepped in and actually decided to buy a lot of corporate debt.
So yeah, to go, I'm gonna start speaking about my industry for sure, and then going along. But basically, yeah, it has kind of an impact. But as I mentioned before, venture capital is a private market. So basically, what happens is that venture capital funds, they raise funds, and if they raised funds before the crisis, they still have a lot of cash to deploy. So the impact will not be felt straight away, like it could be in private markets, in public markets. Sorry, as we saw in every stock exchange, basically that went bust, basically. But so the industry is reacting in the sense that with COVID, for example, the Israeli VC industry reacted just, it was unbelievable how every startup in tech, in medical technology reacted, working with each other, collaborating. Uh, Basically, even the army got involved in developing new technologies in order to make more testings, in order to accelerate to find the medicines. So it was pretty unbelievable how the industry reacted. And in terms of financially, we're going to see the impact, not right now, but for sure companies which didn't have any more capital and were supposed or they were planning basically to raise capital in the next few months or in the next few quarters, I would say, even they will be struggling, because when you're in a crisis like this one, of course, cash is king. So if you need to raise cash during this coronavirus situation crisis, it's going to be very hard. So it's very important that companies are well funded, and like this they can basically have a runway and have some cash for over a year or at least 2-3 quarters in order to survive this crisis. But the impact the impact is not straight away. It's going to take a bit more time to be seen. But we expect a drop in valuation in tech companies of around 15%, 20% in the next few months, few quarters.
Thank you. Chrysis, did you have a comment?
Other than that, what Michael has said, which I fully agree, is we need to look at the bigger picture. Every country has reacted to this in a different manner. We need to remember that this is a health crisis, first of all, and the impact will come later in the financial crisis. Every financial crisis that we have seen, at least in the last 20 years, if you know the S&P 500 in the .com recession, it took about 3 years to go from peak to bottom, and in 2008 it took about 2.5 years. So you see that the impact of a recession or the financial impact takes time. Now, if the government printing money in that if that will help or not, we'll see. We need to see if we have been at the bottom. We need to see what was their correct approach in this health crisis. If some countries that took a different approach and now they may see a second wave, it might be worse, or the other way around. So we're not there yet on what is the impact of coronavirus and the corporate debt and the financial impact. So just to add on the corporate debt and just to add on Michael, it will be difficult for companies to find corporate debt if they haven't got the cash to support it, and there will be some companies that will struggle. That's for sure. So let's wait and see. Well, my advice to everybody who's listening is, we're going through a historical moment. It's good to read and study and follow the news on a daily basis, because everything changes on a daily basis. So this is a very good opportunity to learn as well as understand the market.
If I can add also, we had an article actually this week in the Israeli newspapers, which were basically top general partners of VC funds in Israel, which were actually saying that probably government help to startups would be, it's kind of a trap for the startup in the future, because they will have to repay debts in the future. So we had an article all about this, about government helps for tech startups, but there are different views on this, and yeah, we'll see in the future for sure what goes on.
But a follow-up on that, would you not see that the government help on a startup simply replaces what a private partner or a private VC fund would contribute?
For sure not, because the government help, which it means that it's a debt for the startup, which in opposite, when like it's money that you need to refund in the future. For sure, sometimes it can be with very, very little interest or even no interest, but at a certain point you need to refund that money. And companies which were basically, because it's important to mention, startups, tech startups which are in very early stage, 1 of 100 succeed. So at a certain point, how will you manage to repay those government help if you do not succeed? So it's a whole story. It's a different industry again. So startup venture capital is a very specific industry. So that was the question raised by some of top general partners: is that as 1 of 100 startups succeed, how the basically refund will go? So yeah, and private money, it's important to know that private money is actual cash to burn. That's what we call it. It's like it's cash to be burned, and people need, like, private money is to spend, but in return, the private investor have equity in the company, which the government won't have for sure.
I see. Okay, that's the unlock. I see. Thank you. I think someone in the comments was asking about is investment banking a larger prerequisite for entry into PE and VC, and and then just some general advice for people who've had their internships cancelled. If you
Yeah, absolutely. Just to add on the investment banking, absolutely, it's a way to get in. I think Michael was saying before, to get into venture capital, you had to have 2 years in a private equity, and the same with me. To get into private equity, I had to have some experience into fund of funds, where I was investing for emerging managers and seeing different strategies, and I got the experience to look at that, and also the restructuring. So yes, you do need something to open the doors. And the second question was, sorry.
So we had a question about investment banking, and the other one was people who've had their internships.
So yeah, that's very funny. It never happened before. Some, as you read in the news, were lucky enough to get an offer extension, not only on their internships, they actually got an offer to stay with the company. So it's very unfortunate. We can't really give you any advice how to do with that. But again, if you had this cancelled, try to knock on more doors and just be honest. This is why I'm late. I guess with other people, I would like the opportunity to prove myself, and just try to knock more doors.
Yeah. So yeah, on investment banking, I would say this is like, it's something. If I had to go back in life, I would basically probably do try to even try to apply to I don't know, M&A or investment banking at a big name. I think of course it opens a lot of doors. That's you work a lot for sure, but at the end of the day, it could be worth it. And coming to coronavirus and canceled internship, yeah, listen, it's a very hard time. Even now, I have some colleagues and friends which are unemployed currently, and it's very hard to find jobs right now. They didn't expect this to happen. I think no one did. So it's a very complex situation for sure. And yeah, I would suggest, to be honest with you, we are actually hiring an intern, which will be probably not coming to the office, but will help us doing data analysis. So yeah, as Chris has said, knock on doors, try, read, and as I said earlier at the first basically section of this webinar, you need to get your CV on the right desk. So you need to push it forward.
Great, thank you. And then a closing question, which I thought would be quite curious to explore is, to what extent do you perceive cheap oil to be a fuel for recovery, and will it help save the airline, trucking, and other transport businesses? And if you want to enlarge the discussion for any other industry.
Can you repeat the question, sorry?
Yeah.
Sure. To what extent do you perceive cheap oil to be a fuel for recovery? And will it help save the airline, trucking, and other transport businesses? Feel free to expand on other industries as well where you see insights.
I think Chrysis is better place to speak about oil than I am.
Okay, let me start with oil. What we've seen in oil is purely fundamentals, right? It's the sudden drop in demand is what caused everything. Eventually, governments will have to agree on a way forward and cut supply. That could be even up to 25 to 30% reduction. But that is purely in the short run, because the world is still dependent in oil. Airline companies, and just to make it more reliable to shipping, everybody wants to change the fuel, and that's where I came back with the 40% fossil fuels being in sea trade. But it's not that simple to change it. It's not a one overnight change, and the world is still dependent. Cars, airlines, everything. Most of the world is still dependent on oil. So if you ask my personal opinion, it will eventually need to bounce back. If that means bounce back to 40 or 60 or more, that's a different question. But in the short run, and when I say short run, I mean the next 10 years, not that short. We will see the oil bouncing back to more normal levels, but in the meantime, some companies will go under with this cheap fuel.
Well, if I may add, because we see it a bit in the venture capital ecosystem and the tech ecosystem, this oil crisis can also be a major aspect for energy transition also, which people will tend probably to move more towards green energy, and so it could have a good impact towards also the transition to green energy.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, just to comment on that question, one of the interesting things I was reading was that even though fuel prices are very low, it doesn't mean that all of these transport companies don't have any other expenses. Like with airlines, they still have to pay for the lease. They still have to pay for slots. So yeah, that's just my thought on it.
Governments are helping a lot airlines to survive, because it's pretty hard. So
yeah, there's a lot of industries very similar to that, and one is shipping. It largely works in very similar way. You still need to have your costs of the crew on board. You still need to pay your fuel, or buy it with a decreased price. But yeah, governments are stepping in different markets. We haven't seen it in shipping particularly.
I see. Thank you. And Michael, a closing question on your industry, and then we'll do a wrap up with a careers question. You said that Israel had done very well with the army stepping in, and tech companies actually coming up with solutions relatively quickly in response to the coronavirus pandemic. What's some advice you would give to other nations and other countries for them to also grow their own startup scene?
So, well, it's a difficult question, because I'm not in a place where I can give advice to any government in the world. But yeah, listen, what happened in Israel is that they also managed the crisis very, very well. They shut down the country very, very quickly. So just to give you, like, we have in Israel a bit more than 200 deaths only, which, well, it's still a lot of death, but compared to other countries, it's a very little amount. So yeah, the country basically has gone together. You have all the med tech scene, which came together also, basically delivering the most tech possibilities for the government to use for against the corona. And yeah, so I don't have any advice to give to government, but for
No,
sure,
but
Israel, the Israeli tech scene is very, very important for the country. You know, it brings it raises over $9 billion of $9 billion of last year, the high tech capital scene in Israel. So it's a very important thing for Israel, and it's also a lot related with the army, because, you know, we're in a country in which, unfortunately, there is war surrounding us. So you have to be ready, and Israel has always been ready in any cases, and this crisis showed it again. Like, you know, it's funny because I have some friends in Switzerland, in France, that they cannot find any mask. Here in Israel, you find in every little shop you see in the street, they sell 1,000 and 1,000 of masks. Same for the hydroalcoholic gel. You can find it anywhere. Like, companies started producing like gel like crazy. So yeah, the tech scene has brought a big support to corona crisis, and yeah.
Great, thank you. And then a closing question, and so to finish off on, is from Raman. If you had to choose another career, what would it be and why? Going back in time, obviously, when you were a student.
So for myself, I honestly probably would be in sports. To be honest with you, I was very addicted to sports, football. I was actually part of the University of Surrey team, football team. So it would probably be sports, but I'm actually very happy to be in the VC industry. You know, meeting entrepreneurs, meeting fund managers every day, speaking.
Are there any downsides?
There probably are. There probably are, for sure. It's hard to name downside of your own industry when you like your job, to be honest. But there probably are some downside. People who are not working within the industry would probably say there is a lot of downside. But actually, you know, entrepreneurs are very young people, talented people, which have crazy stories, and you meet them. You meet some of them on a regular basis. Same for fund managers. They've been investing throughout various crises. Stories are unbelievable, and so it's very nice to be in this kind of industry. So I don't know. Probably sports would be.
For myself, I honestly can't see myself in any other industry. To be frank, if it wasn't private equity in shipping, it will still have to do something with shipping or with private equity, or with. The only thing I could think of is I'm a numbers guy, so eventually I would be somewhere in finance. I can't think of a particular industry, perhaps restructuring, which is what I did at the placement. But as Michael said, when you like your job, the downsides, the benefits outweigh the disadvantages and the downsides.
Great, thank you. I think this has been a very interesting webinar. Thank you. Yeah, thank you both for coming on and answering the questions, and also the questions from the public. So I hope that people have had some insight to that. Sorry, Jerry, we're just closing off, but I'm sure they'll be happy to answer it afterwards, your question afterwards. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for everybody from watching. Unless you guys have any final thoughts, I think we can call it a day.
I would just add that I would be happy to answer some questions or some requests on LinkedIn. If you do not hesitate to send me some messages, I will be happy to answer you guys. And yeah, always happy to help undergraduate students. Thank you, Marco, for organizing this. I think it's a great initiative, to be honest. I think while I was in undergrad, we didn't have this kind of webinars with I don't know if even we had some conference with alumni, but I think a webinar, it's pretty easier to follow. You can be anywhere in the world and follow the webinar. So very great initiative.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. I agree. Great initiative. As soon as Marco reached out, I was like, absolutely. This is great. I wish we had the same back in the day in webinars, and I believe webinars can add a lot of value. And as Michael said, feel free if you have any questions to reach out on LinkedIn or my email or directly. Marco can give you the details. We're open to help if we can.
Excellent. Thank you guys very much. Thank you to everyone who's been watching the whole time, or people who left early or have come in late. You can watch it back on YouTube and on Facebook as well. And please let me know and let the Economics and Finance Society know if you'd like to see any other topics. I think that's everything for today. Thank you very much to everyone. See you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Marco. Bye-bye.